Today we're going to practice justifying our results. And the reason why we're going to take time doing that is because that's how our statement of inquiry ends. And the reason why our statement of inquiry ends that way in Unit 1 is because in mathematics, we want to not only be correct, but we want to be able to communicate to people why we know we're correct. Because math is not generally an opinion. We need to be confident in following the fundamentals of algebra to prove that we know what we're talking about. So I'm going to give you an example here, and then you're going to try it yourself. So in this example, I'm asking us to use the order of operations, so that would be GEMS, to evaluate. And then I'm asking us to justify the steps. Okay, so you can do this a couple different ways. You can feel free to write a paragraph over here if that's your style, or you can kind of keep like a numbered list how I'm going to do it. Either way, whatever works for you. So I'm going to take steps in GEMS and then immediately write down what I'm doing on the right-hand side. So let's see here. So let's write down our order of operations. And when I think about that first step, we absolutely have grouping symbols. So I'm going to start by taking 5 minus 1, which is 4. As soon as you just have a single number inside the parentheses, you don't need to rewrite the parentheses. If you would like to rewrite it again, you most certainly can. So in the justifying your steps, I would maybe start by saying, step 1. Start with grouping symbols. And that's all I would need to write, right? Start with grouping symbols. That's what I did, right? I started by taking 5 minus 1. Now notice how I don't have to get super detailed on this by saying, start with the grouping symbols where you take 5 minus 1 and that result is 4. If you want to justify your steps by just saying start with the grouping symbols, people can look at your work over here, which is another way to communicate in mathematics, and they can see that when you say start with grouping symbols, you're starting with those parentheses there. Okay, the next thing in GEMS would be exponents. And we do have an exponent over here. So I'm going to be careful not to take 5 times 2. This is 5 times 5, or 25. Okay, so that's my second step. I would say evaluate exponents. The next thing in GEMS is multiplication or division. We don't have any multiply or divide signs, right? I see a minus and a plus, so we can skip that. The last step on this one, we need to be really, really careful because that would be our adding and our subtracting going from left to right. So whatever comes first, I have to do first. And this is where justifying, we're going to want to really be explicit in our explanation. So 25 minus 13 is going to give us 12. And I would say complete any adding or subtracting from left to right. And here, since there are two things here, right, the minus and the plus, maybe I would even add this problem has subtraction first. Right, so I'm explaining why I did that 25 minus 13 instead of the 13 plus 4. Okay, last but certainly not least, 12 plus 4 would be 16. And maybe I would even say something simple like finish problem by adding. Now, you can see I did a pretty simple 1, 2, 3, 4 step list, right, where I even listed my steps. But again, if you really love to communicate in words, you really, really love to express yourself that way, you can write a paragraph. That's fine. The other thing too is some of you might be looking at this and you're like, I really want to say that 5 times 5 is 25. You can add more detail. That's totally fine. Okay, but when we think about justifying our steps, you're really just explaining why you started with this first step. Why did you go here next? Why did you do this subtraction first instead of the addition? You're just explaining it. I like to think of it as like it's your turn to be the teacher. Pretend like you're explaining this to a younger sibling or maybe a friend who's missed class. So I've shown you this example. I want you to try this one, in which case it's almost identical but a different problem. And then on the second page, I want you to read this problem and try your hand at some explanation. But again, even though I'm using the word explain, it really is you justifying your reasoning, okay? Good luck, 8th graders.